Sure, you had the best studio equipment. In the days ahead, remember that those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will mount up with wings as eagles. They will run and not be weary. They will walk and not faint. And always remember Rich's word of advice: when you think you need to do just a little bit more to make something perfect, don't touch a nothing. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now we know in part, but then we will know even as we are known. There may be moments ahead that you will need to remember his voice, his face, his faith. It said, if you live it, you can give it. Rich Harris did. He had a tool for everything, always the best ones, and a checklist, and a schedule, the green egg for barbecue, well planned out dinner menus, N95 masks way before a pandemic because he used them to make his homemade habanero hot sauce. His life verse, if he had only one, was a proverb from Solomon's lexicon. Surely he would leave that word with us today. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. When Rich was diagnosed with cancer, he strode onto the field like a champion armed for battle. With every blow to his body, his spirit stood up stronger. And ultimately, if you can believe it, the C word lost its sting. He saw every clinician and physician and fellow patient as someone who needed an embrace, a listening ear, a prayer, an encouraging word. His hospital room became the filling station for doctor and patient alike. And they would come to hear his stories, and he would always ask them theirs. Rich is a veteran of war, of Vietnam, of 9/11, of cancer, of honor, of faith, a believer, a disciple, a churchman, founding elder here at the gate. And in literal biblical proportions, he served the widow, the single mom, the young man without a mentor or a father, his family, his community, his nation, his God. He loved the creed of the church, especially the add-on created by Pastor Mahesh. And if the pastor left that part off after forgiveness of sins, resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting, Rich would shout out the proper ending. I believe in Jesus. I believe in his resurrection. Therefore, I believe in signs, wonders, and miracles. And we did see some miracles. For a guy who avoided the spotlight, the circumstance of arriving at this moment to honor him today has been peculiar, to say the least, including weather setbacks and everything you can imagine. But today is the anniversary of Rich's father's passing, and his interment with military honors will coincide with the anniversary of Elwin Sr.'s burial. There must be angels in attendance. On Rich's last Sunday, I saw the video. He was detailing for Micah how to go about his current project and pull it off without a hitch on the back end. The right tool, how to position it, in which cardboard or plastic box to find just the right nail. He was a man who dreamed big, loved without reserve, worked hard, prayed, believing, taught us responsibility, in the words of one young man's note, and super cool things more than anybody else ever had. Made us happy to be around him, showed us a job could be fun, built a lasting monument to all that is good and worthy, who laughed a lot and always praised the Lord with the volume turned up full blast. With him, we lived our better parts. He is a part of all we become. And as a Native American chief friend of mine was told by his mother on her deathbed, I am not dead. Like a river, I live on through you. Today, Rich would turn the volume up again and drown out everything but grace and glory in the presence of the one he loved most, served best, and trusted to the fullest. Those who knew him knew he had one desire, and that was for everyone he loved and everyone he touched to know his Jesus the way Rich did. Rich learned to love well. He was well loved. And most of all, he knew the one who loved him well, the Son of God who gave his life in exchange for each of us here. Elwyn Richard Harris Jr. is not dead, but sleeps. And when he wakes, God grant his highest prayer, reunion with all he loved so well. No regrets, nothing missing, the circle of fellowship unbroken and complete. There was a poem in the East Hampton Star that announced Rich's birth. It read, "Great elms, standing 100 years or more, have stretched their arms across the way to touch the fingers of their mates and greet before the coming song of birds and busy day. Above the arches festooned from the sky, below the cooling shades of night, remain as lovers loath to part and say goodbye. Great spirits, strong and true, have from long past communed oft with men and women there, and touched the heart of those that live at last with joy and freedom and with hope in prayer. Like one of those great elms, the arms of his grace stretch a leafy bower over our way and touch the fingertips of our heart, not just today. While we are loath to say goodbye, his valor transcends this present parting and leaves us with a lingering prayer that we would each receive the same gift of faith that Rich had. To Julie, Nate, Kelly, and Susan, to each of you in that lifelong group of friends who first met around faith in Jesus Christ and encounter with the Spirit serving at Moody, to every member of the Force and Guard down through the years, to the members of the Gate, and to his family, Rich Harris would have us hear him singing for his captain the words of his favorite song. All my life, you have been faithful. All my life, you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. I will sing of the goodness of God. Rich would say a life surrendered in service to Christ is the only life, an unending one of reward and hope. He would remind each of us that he knew so well, that God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes on him will not perish, but will have everlasting life. Time's a-wasting, he would say. What are you going to do? And specifically, what are you going to do with Jesus today? On his behalf, I put that word to you. Rich surrendered all and has stepped over ahead of us to receive his promotion and reward. He will be buried with his boots on, that old pair, the comfortable ones that he put on at the end of a day. Well used, disfigured through years of love poured out in service and projects around home, around the neighborhood, mismatched strings and all. No one will fill those boots quite the same because he is one of a kind, profound yet simple, predictable and full of surprises, a noble man of God. To Rich Harris, with all our hearts, in deepest love and joyful thanks, we salute you. We will see you in the morning. Rich's last words were, I think I'll rest now. Jesus is going to fix me. And he has. I want to welcome Heather.
To begin, I'm going to blow a shofar. It's a symbol and a tradition that announces awakening, beginning, a call to war, the presence of the Lord and his victory. And it was something that was very precious to my father. Got this on our last trip to Israel, where he delighted to see my mother have the opportunity to go and fulfill a dream, to go to the land where his Savior walked, to bless the people of Israel, and to be a part of what's happening in that nation this day, another sign of God's faithfulness and goodness in the earth. And so I'm just going to blow this. We blew it over him for his 50th wedding anniversary, and we're going to blow it now as just a thankfulness and exaltation of the Lord's victory over his life. First and foremost, I want to express how thankful I am for the man that we, my siblings and I, called Dad. I'm thankful for a lifetime of memories that I can reflect on, and in them see the hand and heart of my father, always there to champion and spur me and those he loved on. I have tangible evidence of my father's love and care, the way he served his family, always looking for how he could bless and empower us. For all who knew him, serving, and I spoke to many of you today who can attest, serving was his love language, and it spoke loud and true. But in the last stage of his life, I have truly seen love. His love that flowed unhindered by the trappings of what he could do for us. His love distilled down to the essence of who he was. His love poured out like a drink offering to the very last drop of his being. Many could look at this day as a day of defeat, but as painful as it has been to say goodbye to my father, I can say that even in his weakest hour, his heart never swayed and his spirit never faltered. He gave himself to the ones he loved, and he fought the good fight to the end. Even as he faced the ticking time bomb of his prognosis, it was not fear of death that kept him fighting for life on this earth. It was his desire to continue to be able to provide for those he loved, both his natural family and the many of you here today whom he called friend. To Brooke, I know he relished to see you and your family flourish in the planning, the detail-oriented that you picked up from him. As Pastor Bonnie already mentioned, Amy, last summer, Dad wasn't able to go to his favorite place and spend time in the summer between the pandemic and his own health issues. But every day, he would get out his computer and start looking at the pictures of the garden, and you'd hear him laughing. Look what Amy's doing today. She would put her Instagrams up of her, farm-to-table goodness happening, and he would be like, oh, I wish I was there. I can just taste that. But at the same time, just so joyful that even though he himself was not personally able to be there, that someone he loved was, and what he had built was being utilized. To Anna, his little rosebud, the smallest of us in stature, but the mightiest in the deeds that she has done, going across the world, laying down her life like her father and serving those who had no other help, but that she answered the call. And to Micah, he got the love of food and the projects. And those tools are migrating, I believe, but I really know that he was so proud of you, Micah, so proud of you. And you and the family that you have started and the legacy that you yourself are carrying on in the Harris name. To Jonathan, our tech research king, Catherine, nursing, extraordinaire student, carrying on. David, He relished your creativity, the videos, the various things you put together. Grace, who got the gardening gene, and even as Pastor Bonnie mentioned, days before he passed, he's on his iPad with Brooke, giving Grace some pointers on how to grow a garden. Timothy, the adventure one, and he loved all of your creative projects, everything you did, your little outdoor pioneer outfits that you were making, and he just delighted. And Mary Anna, the avid reader, he loved to just see that gift in you. And even Gallia, not quite up to talking yet, but he commented one day that her eyes are deep, and just her gaze had touched his heart. So, and friends, so glad that you are here. He truly loved his friends. He truly loved those whose hearts he connected to, and he wanted the best, the greatest for each one of you. He died a hero. He died an overcomer. He never gave up. He never wavered in the face of death. He won his battle. He won his race. As you will probably hear from every person here today, my dad showed his love in his service, but one of the primary ways he loved was through food. 90% of the items in my kitchen are gifts from my father. Throughout my college and grad school years, I would regularly receive a new gadget to ensure that I didn't starve and ate in style. In the age before Instant Pot, I had a bread maker, a rice cooker, a vegetable steamer, and plenty of care packages full of snacks and sweets. One Easter a few years ago, my parents came to visit me. As we prepared Easter dinner together, my father was appalled at my lack of kitchen utensils. The final straw may have been when I needed to burn the alcohol off of a gravy. And after an extensive search of my kitchen and entire house for yet another missing item, this time matches or a lighter, my father, the MacGyver, a paper towel and lit a flame off the burner eye of my stove so that we could complete the Easter dinner preparations. For weeks following, I received daily Amazon packages with everything from a refillable industrial-strength butane lighter that would yes, I didn't have those either, and anything else my father felt was missing from my kitchen repertoire. And food, like every other endeavor he pursued, he was a man who valued using the right. My parents' joy was their family, and in recent years, they invested their time and resources restoring my father's childhood home, and in turn, creating a haven where they could host their children in the beautiful seaside community where my father grew up. While my vacation priority when I went there was to be with family and relish time to linger at water's edge, going days without a schedule or agenda, and just enjoying the natural beauty of the East End without the squelching heat and humidity of a summer in the South. My father, a man with a mission who hated to sit still for long, was intent on making sure I made the most of my time. That meant that the first morning of vacation would commence at no later than 7 a.m. with a consult with my father. He would have an Excel spreadsheet and a calendar in hand and begin to drill down on the vacation menu. On the spreadsheet was an itemized list of food broken down by what was in the freezer, what was perishable in the refrigerator, what produce would be ripening in the garden, as well as what needed to be picked up at Costco or Luigi's or any of the specialty shops that were at least an hour and a half drive away. The calendar's purpose, of course, was to make sure to note which meals were going to be eaten on which night, and to also make sure that we didn't conflict with any weather patterns that were on their way or any special activities that we wanted to make sure that we put in. As you may have guessed by now, food is not necessarily my favorite top priority, but my father wanted to make sure I had opportunity to put in my favorite meal requests, choose a day for cooking at the beach, and make note of any special local restaurants or seafood specials that I would like to enjoy while I was there. The same went for outdoor activities. After the menu was established, the next order of service was to discover what I was going to do outside. This, of course, entailed pulling out the weather maps, the tide tables, the wind speeds, and any unforeseen events that might be happening. And this happened every morning because, of course, the weather changes on a daily basis. So every morning, as I stumbled out to get a cup of coffee, I would be greeted with the wind report and what time the tide would be best for going kayaking, whether I should stay in town that day because it might rain, and just to make sure that I did not waste a moment of my vacation. That was my dad, methodical, brilliant, attentive to detail, and legendary for his lists, plans, and reports. He had a laminated checklist for everything. I know those of you in the guard with him, you were required to have a laminated checklist, but he had one in his truck. It was for things like, do I have my keys, my sunscreen, my sunglasses, the list of things that you might regret forgetting. He could never understand how anyone could make the same mistake twice. There's a list for that. He kept a daily diary filled not with personal reflections, but the minute details of each project he was working on, being it gardening, grilling on his big green egg, or renovation, so he could reference his notes to improve his outcome the next time around. He wasn't compulsive or obsessed with order. You can take a look at his workbench and verify that. But it was his joy and his goal to take care of others and provide for them well. In contrast with my father's methodical project management, my mother is more on the free-flowing, creative end of the spectrum. But together, they were great creators. Whether it was photography, sewing, and most recently pottery, my father would research and equip her with all the tools she needed to pursue her artistic vision. As she became more proficient in ceramics, my father would watch her videos with her, rejoice in her progress, perhaps give her some unsolicited tips on her throwing technique, and dream up the next project that he could do so that she could fire and flourish in her creations. This included equipping a full ceramic studio in her house and rewiring the garage to install a kiln so she could fire her creations at home. In the last year, when his good days were far and few between, he still managed to reroute plumbing under the house and install a new sink so that she could clean her tools and wash her dense clay material away without clogging the plumbing. With each new firing of the kiln, he couldn't wait for her to bring in her latest piece so he could see how it turned out. He was thrilled to see her flourish. My father's other love language was his faith. It was a faith that evolved and grew over his lifetime. Rather than growing old, hardened, and embittered by life and the hardships it could bring, or despondent by his own diagnosis and the suffering as he fought the good fight against this cancer's invader in his body, I was humbled and amazed by his faith. At one point, about a year after he was diagnosed, my father remarked, this was, by the way, when he had driven across the country to come help me move, and spent 8 hours putting my bed together from IKEA, I might note. But we got it done, and we still loved each other at the end. But he said, as much as we wanted to see an instant miracle healing when I was diagnosed with cancer, in retrospect, I would not change a thing. All my life, I've been afraid of cancer, the disease that killed his father at a young age of 49. But in this process, he said, I have no fear. I know the Lord is with me, and I've experienced him in his presence in a way that is beyond anything I thought or knew was possible. And he had been a man that knew Jesus. But as he was pressed into that press of his life circumstances, he became one who knew the Lord. And you could see it on his face, hear it in his voice, and it exuded in everything he said and did. My father encountered the living God, the Savior who had overcome death and grave, his shepherd who loved him and cared for him, and the one whose grace is sufficient for every trial. He could laugh at bad news because his hope was not anchored in this world, but in the one who made the world. My father, a man who had a plan for everything and a backup plan for every contingency, was tender, vulnerable, open, and childlike in his unwavering confidence that his heavenly Father was taking care of him in the midst of the uncontrolled chaos taking place in his body. As you heard, his last words before slipping out of our union in grief, sorrow, and confusion, we have been a solid front. I can tell you this is not where we started, but it is the fruit of the 5 years of my father's faith, leadership, prayer, and the place he and my mother made for us to follow in absolute surrender and assurance of God's victory. In his final hours in that struggle to rid himself